The whole from a Libran perspective is just light fun. I happen to be a sun sign Libra with natal Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, and Vesta in Libra. So yeah, even without Buddhism, I'm by nature very middle pathy. Let's start with the basic question, is AI generated illustration art? I ran through an analysis based on Socratic, Platonic, and Taoist Confucian philosophies, and you can read a blog post I wrote on the subject back in 2021, which I'll link in the description box. In my post, I reflected on how, from a Socratic and Platonic perspective, I'd argue that yes, AI generated imagery is art for sure. It exhibits grace, it imitates that which is intrinsically beautiful in nature. It appears to be both the result of mechanical skill and divine possession, though maybe we can have a conversation on what divine possession means. And the fact that AI art can win awards and art contests says to me that it's evoking emotions in viewers. Now, from a Taoist and Confucianist perspective, I'm not as convinced that AI imagery is art. I'm not convinced, I'm just not convinced. So from a more Eastern perspective, the artist's chi or life force matters a lot in determining whether something is to be valued as art. In addition, as another layer to whatever the subject matter of the work is, that work also needs to communicate something about the artist's character and personal spirituality. So, funny enough, in a way, you can say it's not as much about divine possession as it is under Platonism, and rather it's more about the religious values and morality of the artists themselves. I also talked about art composition, design theory, the elements per disegno born out of the Italian Renaissance, and the elements per Confucianist aesthetics. This is where I think rational conclusions from those factors get unsettling because then, yeah, I would argue that yes, AI generated imagery, when they meet those design theory components, is art. Then there's the legal perspective of, is AI generated imagery copyright protected? Right now, we're looking specifically at how the AI art is being generated, and based on the tech and the way they're created at the moment, the answer has been no, AI generated art is not copyright protected. But I'd also point out that things are moving really fast. The law has never been able to keep up with the pace of technological innovation. I've actually published law review articles on this topic, several in fact, on markets of innovation, IP, and the law. So what's really new here in concept is that for the longest time, if something qualified as art based on most of these generally agreed upon principles of consideration, it was most certainly going to be copyrightable. And here's where we're treading on new ground in a way, because now something we qualify as art based on traditional metrics, we're saying is not copyright protected because tech has created a condition that falls through the gaps of current IP. Also, as copyright law is currently being interpreted, AI art is not infringement because if I study 12 different protected works of art depicting a cat in a hat and then merge, reconcile, pull bits and pieces from all 12 to create my own unique work of art of a cat in a hat, even if it's copying bits and pieces from the pre-existing works, that's not infringement. Or if I study an artist's portfolio and art style closely and then mimic that art style, that's also not infringement. So this is actually a large part of why the AI art situation is a controversy. It's because by all the perspectives and lenses of interpretation we've just covered, we're basically telling artists and illustrators that their feelings are not valid. We're basically saying that gut feeling you have inside, that intuition, that something's a little off here, that's not valid. I would go so far as to say most of us almost unanimously can intuit, like your gut feelings is feeling right here. You can intuit that something about all of this is not okay. It doesn't seem to pass the smell test. But nothing in terms of established frameworks allow you to reach the rational conclusion that it's not okay. So analytically, you have to say it's fine, but intuitively and philosophically, it feels wrong. And you just can't shake that feeling off. As an artist, your art style is your identity. It is what Taoists would call your chi. It's your essence. It's not just you, but it's the most exalted and most divine aspect of you because it's your creativity and ingenuity. Up to this point, by and large, obviously there are exceptions, but for the most part, humans don't 100% accurately mimic another human artist's art style. On some theoretical metaphysical level, you can make the argument it's impossible. Your sense of self is just too strong. So even if you study another artist's style closely and come very, very close to echoing that style, you almost can't help yourself from adding bits of your own chi. You can't help putting your own spin on it. We can call it ego, but in this case, it's healthy ego. So in short, unless you're coming at it willfully, intentionally with bad faith, then even if you are inspired by another artist's style, you're still going to just naturally end up doing your own thing. Whereas that's not the case for AI. If you input instructions to replicate a certain artist's style, it's going to do that almost to perfection, to the point where even the artist themselves second guess and are like, wait, did I do that? Is this one of my... Right now, the law says that's okay because style is not copyright protected. But from an artist's perspective and intuitively, it feels like identity theft. And we do understand as a society that that's wrong. When it comes to protecting corporate identity, we understand that trademark infringement is wrong. If my brand aesthetic trade dress looks too confusingly similar to your brand, that's trademark infringement. But for some reason, we don't understand how or why confusingly similar art styles is identity theft for an artist. We don't understand or we don't care to understand because artists are still just not valued. This raises a tangential interesting point. Based on my books, writing, and style of content on this Benebelwen platform, I often get typecast as being overly analytical, and sometimes I do a little bit take an issue with that because, at least from my vantage point, it's not entirely true. Meanwhile, among my colleagues in law, my friends in tech in Silicon Valley, I'm often typecast as being too much of a softie, too emotional, too concerned about the humane components and overly trusting of intuition. I try very hard to be both. I start by figuring out what the objective standard of analysis should be, run the issue through that analytical framework as rationally as I can, and then once I get that rational based conclusion, I always take pause and I do try my best to check in with my feelings, my emotions. Does this feel right? Does this pass the vibe check? One of the most fascinating oversights of AI is implicit bias because it is based on a fixed algorithm that's systemic and can therefore overlook things that human intuition and compassion would better pick up. And obviously, that's not to absolve humans of being guilty of implicit bias. The point is, if you are too much in the field of analytical frameworks and syllogisms, everything is a tautology, if this and that's just kind of algorithmically how you process life, you do run the risk of basically overlooking people who fall through the cracks of that framework, who don't fit into these boxes and these if-then statements neatly. Hence, systemic harm arises. It's just something we need to be mindful of. I think humans are more individually discriminatory and AI can be programmed to not be individually discriminatory. But AI might miss systemic discrimination because I think you need that intuitive and emotional value and compassion to initially spot systemic discrimination. All this being said, I do want to address how people tend to antagonize what they don't agree with, and that's not okay either. I don't love the rhetoric of AI art lacks soul or I am sensing dark energy, low vibration. Like what's up with that? I don't know. I get really uncomfortable when we antagonize and use that type of rhetoric to describe any aspect of anything that we feel is too unfamiliar to what we know. Not okay. Okay, but if I'm going to get, people always get in trouble when they say but, right? If I'm going to get psycho-spiritual about it though, I kind of get where that sentiment is coming from. I'm not going to deny that I think I see something that feels really unsettling and apathetic, cold, unemotional to a lot of AI art, and there is a recurring pattern that emerges there. But my speculated rationale for why that is does diverge from the typical AI artist soulless camp. In fact, it's the opposite. I'm scared that given the nature of how the algorithms and how AI works, it's showing us a crystal clear, direct portrait of our own collective human soul. I'm scared that that's what we look like. On one hand, it's not okay to dismiss what at this point is most of the artist community calling attention to their concerns. On the other hand, it's not okay to vilify AI. I also do see a lot of mischaracterization of the AI tech in efforts to prove a biased point of view. Out of 300,000 instances of AI generated art, 5 of them show up with traces of watermarks or artist signatures are being used to make sweeping generalizations about all AI art. Whereas, imagine if I cited on one hand the 5 bad actor human artists that copied and misappropriated work and said, you see this, you see what happened here? Obviously, we can now conclude from these 5 instances that all human artists copy, misappropriate, and are bad actors. But back to the other hand, I can tell you that even as an amateur artist, recently with this sharp rise in AI generated art, especially tarot art, I can't explain how or why, but I totally lost all motivation to continue working on my Atea tarot art deck. Oh, you don't know what I'm talking about? Oh my gosh, let me show you what I've been working on. I sit down with the intention of getting creative and getting more progress on my artwork, but then I just feel whoa. And I've never felt that way before. It's not just run-of-the-mill artist or creative block. No, as an artsy person, I know what creative blocks feel like. This is so much more profound than that, you know? It's like I'm unconsciously tapping into something that's going on in the universe and it's putting a damper on my motivation as a human to create. And then I realize I'm not the only one. A lot of sensitive artists are expressing the same experience right now with the advent and rise of AI generated art flooding the marketplace in social media content. And flip-flopping to the other hand, I do love that AI is democratizing the creation of beautiful illustrations. I no longer need to be gifted. I no longer need to be rich enough to hire the best artist around for me to create beautiful, beautiful illustrations completely aligned with and conveying what's in my heart and mind. But to bring this back to the community of tarot deck creators and deck publishing, what do we do about a situation like when John Doe, who has not taken the personal path of self-development as an artist, uses an AI generator to produce a tarot deck and then doesn't mention it was AI generated art? Personally, when it comes to tarot and oracle decks being published, I've been wondering about these ethical disclosure obligations for a really long time, especially since the advent of digital art. Does an artist have an ethical obligation to disclose what part of the artwork is hand-drawn or original and what part is digital art, what part is derivative, and to what extent are they using digital art tools? Are you photo bashing? Exactly how much and to what extent is photo manipulation happening? How much of the artwork is based on automated photo effects? And when we get into digital photo collage art, like to what extent is there an ethical disclosure obligation to talk about where you're sourcing your royalty-free or even public domain works from. So yeah, of course, legally you don't have an obligation to say anything, but do you have an ethical or moral obligation as an artist to cite your sources? I don't have answers to those questions, but I do think it's really interesting that as a community, we didn't really care too much or too loudly about those questions before when it was digital art and humans doing the thing. But now that it's AI doing the thing, oh, now suddenly we're in an uproar and everyone's talking about ethics and morality in art. Now, in terms of artists, or more accurately, professional illustrators and graphic designers losing their jobs, that's most likely going to be a reality. I really don't foresee a detrimental impact when it comes to human created fine art, but I do see a huge impact when it comes to professional illustrators and graphic designers. Although also maybe not. Maybe it's just that the role or the job description of the graphic designer is going to be more art curator. And so like the specificities of what designers and artists would do in a commercial capacity with AI is going to change. A personal experience I had as an author did shift around some of my thoughts. So for my I Ching the Oracle book, the cover art design, that I got two galleys that came back, or two mock-ups, and I didn't love either one. So like the first one, like I didn't even know what it had to do with in terms of I Ching or Taoism. Like it had nothing to do with anything that I could think of that was in the book. In fact, like if you weren't literate, if you couldn't read English and you just looked at the book cover design, you would have thought that it was like the book cover art for like a book on C++ computer programming. I do know that all the stakeholders involved really did try to work hard to revise the book cover art design so that it better reflected some of my own aesthetic point of view. I mean, I know people tried, but like at some point there was an issue with resource management, right? I mean, like at the end of the day, it's a human artist or a graphic designer. And so we did come up against the issue of resource management, and enough was enough. And I basically just had to settle with the artist's last best try and not push the issue because, you know, you know why. So that is what it is, and I'm just going to go with the flow. Then on my own time, just for shits and giggles, I took all of 60 seconds to type in keywords that I felt like might reflect my book and my author point of view, and a couple of keywords when it comes to, my aesthetics. I put in the word Taoism, and a few moments later, I got like 10 beautiful AI generated works of art for my potential book cover design. I'm not going to use, I'm just saying like a thought experiment, right? Like I did it, and I just, if any of those 10 options were the book cover for I Ching the Oracle, I would have been over the moon happy. That's how great they came out. And an AI did that. Whereas with a human, we were going at this for like literally a whole year and we still weren't getting it right. Meanwhile, the AI generator shot back like 12 really fantastic options in half a minute. Like, what do I do with that information? How do I process that? Back to the tarot. The thing with the tarot, at least for me, is that it's not strictly art for art's sake, right? It's not fine art. At the end of the day, a tarot deck is a tool. So the art process is cool to know. It's a nice to have, but at the end of the day, for me, the tarot deck needs to be an operational tool. So in a lot of ways, the creator's experience matters, their occult philosophy, like a lot of those kind of immeasurables and intangibles matter a lot more than, I don't know, how beautiful the artwork, although it's kind of like a balance, obviously. So if a creator who is a very seasoned and experienced tarot reader but personally isn't a very good artist, uses AI to produce beautiful artwork that perfectly reflects the creator's tarot interpretations, that's something worth investing in. I'd buy that. If a tarot practitioner or an occultist that I really respect uses AI art to create a deck that can more accurately align with their specific point of view, the symbolism they want, their vision for the deck, much more so than if they pair it up and partner with a human artist. I think I'm as a tool, like being objective and being an asshole here, right? I might prefer the AI generated art deck by the occult practitioner who can more fully control the outcome of that of the artwork because they're using AI. It's more reflective of that specific occultist who might not happen to have artistic abilities, more so than the creator being paired up with somebody else and not being in full control of what happens. I don't know. It's a toss up because, I value the artist's inspiration and little things that happen, a lot of really cool, like it's hard to say, right? Magic happens when you get two people together. That chemistry produces really beautiful, magical, unexpected, unforeseen art too. So, like both, right? I want both. So for me, intention does matter a lot. I feel like if there's no genuine thought that goes into the deck and it's obviously a cash grab or they're trying to hide the ball and not disclose that it's AI generated art, like why are you doing that? That makes me wonder what your intentions are. When it's that, then okay, no thanks. So to sum up, go use AI as a tool to create a tarot or oracle deck, but just know that because one aspect of the process now admittedly takes less labor, you need to invest that labor elsewhere. So if it's not the actual mark making and line work of the art that you are pouring your heart and soul into, then you have to pour your heart and soul elsewhere so that the final product I see and intuit still has heart and soul. As a creator using AI generators as a tool, you have to think about the value you are adding to the project. So you really have to be mindful that it's not just the keywords that is your value add. Like, what is your value add? If your art takes half a second to produce and it is, based on what we know about how the tech works, it is this sort of collective hodgepodge, whatever, that's how the art is being created, then what aspect of the art is revealing your personal chi? As an occult practitioner, as a tarot reader, as a spiritualist, as a tarot creator, as an artist, you have to figure out how can this project still reflect who you are, your spirituality, and that chi. Let's discuss. What are your thoughts?